Friends, be seated. We are saved with creation. Salvation is one of those topics that Episcopalians don't really like to talk about, because we live in a world where salvation always tends to be hand in hand with maybe a set of 4 tracts that are handed to you with a tract that's handed to you with the 4 spiritual laws on it. Or salvation is hand in hand with a conversation about who's not saved, right? Salvation, when we hear it in the world around us, always goes hand in hand with judgment, right? Salvation of some means judgment of others. There is a more ancient Christian understanding of salvation than one that rests in the judgment of God. It is an understanding of salvation that is embedded in the story that we first heard, the story of creation. So much of the Christian texts are actually a paraphrasing or retelling or revisiting of a story of creation. Because fundamental to early Christian understanding of the way the world worked was that creation is essential to who we are. And that the work of God did not begin with Jesus. The work of God to save the world, to bring people into relationship with God, did not begin with Jesus. The work of God to bring creation into relationship with God began when God created. When God breathes the world into being, when God takes the helter-skelter of whatever was there or not there. We can debate creation out of nothing or not, but that helter-skelter, did you catch that phrase? So often we hear that as chaos, but the helter-skelter of what was there, that God brings that into an order, a pattern into which we can live. From the beginning, that is God's work of salvation. Because from the beginning, what God wants is that we, as creatures, as human beings, as animals, as plants, as planets rotating around suns, that we live in relationship, in communion with our Creator. And in this strand of Christian understanding of Jesus, Jesus takes on all of that matter, flesh and blood and bone, and does it in a world where people were a little bit skeptical of how much God was actually in us. It was something that certainly the Greeks struggled with. Not big fans of blood and flesh were the Greeks. And certainly within Judaism, Jesus steps into a conversation with his fellow Jews about where God is and who God is in and what God's life among us looks like. It's an ongoing debate, because the truth is, I think we look at the world around us and we're like, I'm not so sure God is here. I'm not so sure God is present in this world. We hear that God creates, the Spirit creates, and it is good. And we look at the world around us and we do not see good. We certainly don't see it very well in our fellow human beings. But to be honest, it's sometimes hard to see it in creation. In a creation that floods cities out, in a creation where mountains erupt, and entire cities are covered with ash. The story of Pompeii is certainly in the minds of our ancient friends. Seas rise, glaciers melt. Every time I get a little picture on my Facebook feed of whatever wildcat is currently hanging out at Seaside, what I think is, that would be so cool, I want to see the cat. I have this thing about cats. But what the picture says is, be careful, beware. This large, not kitty cat, is dangerous. We have a tense and difficult relationship with the creation around us, and sometimes the way we have used that, the way we have reacted to what feels like the inhospitality of creation is to be inhospitable to it, to dominate it, to control it, to want to think that we know how to make it work better than it works by itself. And one of the things I think we are learning rather brutally right now is that that was not a very smart decision on our part. It is shocking to me how often research now confirms, oh, actually the way that our bodies do this, or the way that creation works, or the way that these plants naturally did these things, actually that works best. It works well. But not always, right? We live in that tension of a natural world that seems to work quite well, but is not also always hospitable to all of the creatures in it. Right? And yet that is the world that God created, through which we have relationship with the Creator. And our relationship, our communion with God, that's how I understand salvation, our friendship with God only happens in and through our friendship with all of the creation of our Creator. God set that in motion from our beginning. Whatever we think of as the beginning of creation, that's the only beginning we have in our minds. God set that in motion from the beginning, because the desire of God is that creation, which includes us, works together, that flourishes together, grows together. It's why that sometimes among the saints, there are always a few that stand out in particular for their relationship with creation. I suspect all of you heard lots of stories about St. Francis of Assisi, right? St. Francis of Assisi, the young son of a wealthy lord, gives up everything, strips himself naked in the square as a kind of in-your-face to his dad. He's like, I don't want all this wealth. Heads out of town and lives an incredibly simple life. Talk about teenage reaction to your dad. But in that simple life, something interesting happens with Francis, and it's one of the reasons that we celebrate St. Francis Day, which is on the 4th, and it is the closing day of this season of creation. There's something interesting that signifies to us that this man is different. He's set apart. And it's his relationship with animals. St. Francis and then Claire, his friend, becomes someone known as someone who animals seem to like and feel safe around. And so every image I've ever seen of St. Francis includes a bird on his shoulder, there's a bear off to the side, there's deer hanging out. This is why we put St. Francis in our gardens. Now, I didn't grow up with St. Francis. In my tradition, We didn't talk about St. Francis because, he was a Catholic. I grew up with a man named St. Seraphim. And every picture of St. Seraphim, who is a Russian saint hanging out in the cold woods of Russia, every icon of St. Seraphim has a bear nearby. Now, St. Seraphim didn't actually have a great relationship with this bear. St. Seraphim, living in his little wooden cabin off in the woods, cutting wood for fire because otherwise he'd freeze to death in the woods of Russia, is attacked by the bear. Right? Creation clashing with us. He survives the attack, and he forgives the bear. And St. Seraphim and the bear become friends. I don't know if it's true or not. But there is something about people who have a relationship with the animals around them that is different, right? We talk about horse whisperers, cat whisperers, dog whisperers, people who somehow have a connection with the creatures around them that's a little bit different. And we speak about them with a kind of respect. And I think it's in part because we recognize in that gift, in that ability to have a relationship with a creature that is utterly strange from us. I sometimes look at my cat and I think, who are you? What are you thinking in that strange little brain of yours? You are totally different than me. Your organs are in different places and your brain doesn't. Do you talk? What kind of conversations are you having with the cats outside? I don't know. I'm just struck by just how alien this little thing is that's inside my house. People who are able to have a relationship with the strange, the different, the not human, in them we recognize something different. And I think sometimes we're a little bit jealous, like, oh, that's kind of cool. But we recognize it as an amazing gift. I think there's something of the holiness of the Creator in that gift. There's something in the holiness of God that has enabled this person, for whatever reason, to have a kind of relationship with a creature that, frankly, I think all of us are called to have. We're created to have it. We're created to be a people who are friends with the creatures and the creation around us. And so when Callistos Ware says, we are saved with creation, what he means in that is that as creation and us, as all God's creatures within creation, as we live in some kind of harmony together, as we live in friendship and relationship, that's what salvation is. Salvation is not rescue from an angry God who needs to forgive you for sins, because we do not start in the world as primarily sinners. That is not our beginning as human beings. When God creates all of creation and looks at it, God declares it's good, and we are a part of that. That is an unreserved goodness. There is no little bits of depravity stuck in there somewhere. We are created good. We are created good. You are created good. God looks at you and God says, you are good. That is how God made us and made all of creation. And so the beginning of salvation does not start with our sin or the ways in which we have failed in creation, which, to be honest, happens pretty early in that story. All you have to do is turn the page, and things begin to fall apart. But that's not our beginning. Our beginning is a God who created us to be in friendship and relationship with all of creation and with the Creator. There is nothing, I think, more beautiful and more hopeful than that image. That's why I am always going back to Genesis, because I happen to love the stories of Genesis. Not because I think they're factual history, but because they say something so important about who we are called to be, how we are called to be. Creation is good. We are good. We are creatures of a good creation. And our future in God has everything to do with being friends with the creation around us. I hope a lot of you have pets. Because sometimes I think we just need something utterly alien to us, utterly strange, to be in our space, in our faces, to sit on our laps, to sit on our computer keyboards when we don't really want them there, to shed their hair everywhere, as a way of reminding us that God is in all creatures. And the love that we bear for our animals, and the love that we bear for the trees as we walk by them, and the sound of the ocean and the wind through the leaves, the ways in which that stirs us, that is the stirring of God. We are a part of creation. Every bit of us has been dirt somewhere else. It is literally true that we are made of dust and dirt, and to dust and dirt we will return. And that is not a tragic thing. That is a beautiful thing. We are made of everything else around us, and everything else around us is in us and through us. And that's not just some mystical, strange, woo-woo thing. It's scientific fact. And how God made our world to be. So today, go home, pet your animal. Enjoy the birds. Listen to the breeze. Take some time with that beautiful and majestic Douglas fir tree across the street. And know that the goodness and the beauty that you experience in that creature, plant, animal, leaf, wind, is the same beauty and goodness that God sees in you. And that our salvation, our relationship with God, has everything to do with being in a loving, kind, caring relationship with everything that is around us. Amen.